I think on that note, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Sam Tallman, joined by, as always, my conversation partner and co-founder here at the Puerto Rico Energy Forum, Tom King. Great to have you as always, Tom. And
Hi,
our
Sam.
guest today is José Humberto Román Morales. He's an electrical
Yeah.
engineer and graduate of Potencia de la Universidad de Puerto Rico, Recinto de Mayagüez. He was a president of the Puerto Rico Energy Commission, the predecessor to the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, is very steeped in all things regulatory and energy in Puerto Rico, and that, amongst other things, is going to be the focus of our conversation today. So, Jose Humberto, welcome and thanks so much for being a part of the Puerto Rico Energy Forum.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the invitation. Hopefully, this will be a productive conversation and you won't kick me out too quickly.
We'll see. I'm going to reserve
Yeah,
judgment.
exactly. No promises.
No, that's sort of the story of energy in Puerto Rico is no promises. So,
And it's been so long since we've actually talked. I mean, I'm just grateful for proof of life. So
Yeah.
Jose, starting the conversation with your experience with the Energy Commission, when you stepped into that role as interim president and really started looking at the massive undertaking that is creating an independent regulatory framework for energy in Puerto Rico, what do you sense is the most misunderstood constraint on the regulator as it was getting started, and then maybe how's that shifted to today?
Uh, no, that's an excellent question. See, when we started, we it was a blank canvas, pretty much. So we had the opportunity to look outside Puerto Rico and try to find best success stories of other regulatory agencies, best standards, how to properly carry out our jobs. When I joined, obviously I had a healthy ego because of my long background, technical background. So I thought that I knew everything that I needed to know. Once I joined, I started working, I realized that there were some areas that I had a big gap, from financing to economics to really what's the public interest, and how to develop the public interest, and how to properly carry out a process, a procedure, so that everybody has a voice and that their voice is listened to, and that we are able to weight in the right evidence to make a proper decision. And that's precisely, I think, one of the challenges that the regulatory body, now the PREP, has, which is when people participate, they don't put the board on a position to understand their interest and to be able to see if their private interests align with the public interest. And if they do align, to properly decide on their favor or to accept an idea that is being proposed. Most of the interveners, or even public participation that are not necessarily an intervention, but say technical hearings, or people just go out there and expresses what they think should be done or what is properly to be done, but that without giving the right evidence or the right information to the board to be able to take that information and say, okay, we can use this. This is useful. I mean, nobody wants a rate increase. So let's start, like, for example, with a rate increase. Nobody wants a rate increase. So you stating, I don't want a rate increase, you should not increase the rate, does not help the regulatory body make a decision, because they don't want their own rates being increased as well. I mean, they always, I mean, so learning, or the people that participate need to start talking the language of the regulator. And I'm not saying learning regulatory jargon per se, but it's knowing I have to be able to put the board in a position to understand my point and to be able to say, that makes sense. Let's take that into consideration. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it leads me to I'm trying to think about the parallels here because the energy crisis on the island generally is sort of a a three-headed monster of it's a governance problem, it's an engineering problem, and it's a financing problem. And so when I think about the Energy Bureau, is it the same three-headed dog in maybe different weights? How much political pressure is there actually there? Is it really more focused on the engineering and the technical capacity? Or is the fiscal reality the North in order to do all of this? How do you balance these different pressures that are present throughout the energy crisis, but the Energy Bureau looks at perhaps through a different lens?
Tell you about my experience. I have no insight of what's going on inside, and that's the official disclaimer before I say anything. No, but obviously the regulator is an independent decision maker. You have the legal independence, but you are not isolated from the world. It's not that you're completely isolated, but then you have the statute gives you directions. And sometimes the statute gives you clear cut, direct orders. And other times there's some flexibility, like gives the regulators the opportunity to use their expertise and to gather expertise from outside the board, either through consultants or through external participation from interveners or public hearings or people commenting on the processes, right? You will always have people trying to talk to you outside of the processes because we're humans. You're outside. I'm with my family in a restaurant. Somebody saw me. I got interviewed for whatever reason, and they're like, "Oh, you were in the news last night." Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, so you are the energy guy? Well, yeah, yeah. Well, so hey, listen, and that happens because people are gonna start recognizing you, or you run into interveners or some other parties, and they recognize you, so they can't help to say, "Wait, now that I have you here, how about if we, oh, what's the status? When are you guys gonna make a decision?" So the regulators have to be very disciplined and say, and I had to tell people, listen, I appreciate you, but we cannot talk about those matters. That's something that is within. We can talk about everything else. Let's talk about wine. Like, what kind of wines are you guys drinking now? Like, for example,
Verdejo.
what?
Verdejo.
Oh, Verdejo, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have to maintain that discipline as a regulator because you cannot help people coming to you or trying to influence. And they're just regular individuals. Never mention some other type of elected officials.
Yeah.
So thinking about those sets of constraints, where should the expertise then be? Where should the expertise lie in the Energy Bureau? I mean, should it be on the economic side? Should it be on the engineering side? On the legal side? Because there are these different facets of that role, and I think plenty of people would say, okay, it's too lawyerly and not enough engineering. But you can have good engineering solutions that don't make sense from a fiscal perspective. What's the in an ideal world, how would you structure that body to take into consideration the 3 or 4 or multiple different phases that have to be addressed here?
You don't necessarily need to have the commissioners per se with the skill, but within the institution of the regulatory body, you need to have individuals that are, energy economics, law, energy law, as well as engineering technical solutions. So you need either through consultants or within in-house, you need to have those type of expertise.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's limited budgets, right? I mean, given the workload and the expectation load that
Yeah.
the regulator has in Puerto Rico, you could quintuple its budget and still probably wouldn't have as much as it really needs, given the long list of things that everybody wants solved now. So it is a selection game. It's a prioritization, and maybe paraphrasing what you said earlier about people not putting it in the right terms, and just saying, hey, you're going to raise my rates. It's like you've got to learn how to make your case. You've got to learn how to speak the language of the regulator. Help the regulator help you, right? And how do you do that, right? You have to cover the bases of what the regulator needs to act and move. I think just in the first instance, to get it on the docket, right? You've got to be able to explain how, what you want them to do, how you want them to do it, why it coincides and supports the public interest, why, all of that sort of checklist of things that
Mhm.
the regular interveners must regularly comply with. But anybody who wants to come in and see something, often, like they said, they just want to talk to you in a restaurant and say, "Can you help me?"
Yeah, no, it
Yeah,
happened. Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
my concern, I mean, part of my concern here and why I was asking about the expertise within the regulatory body per se is on the intervener or the energy sector side or the developer side, there's a lot of very loud special interest groups in Puerto Rico that have the means to speak the regulator's language, but don't necessarily have the best interests of the island at whole in mind, not because they're malicious or nefarious, but because they have their own narrow project goals or sector goals. And that's where the regulator has to be able to say, you framed it exactly right, but we have a broader mandate beyond just what is good for you. And so this is and you mentioned rate cases or the rate setting adventure, you might call it, in its own bucket, but then also the interconnection queues or responding to the political pressure. And by political pressure, I mean, what the legislative body has set out as energy priorities that the regulator responds to. All of these end up being right, pulling the regulator in a variety of different reasons where the body itself has to be able to say, I can cut through very articulate noise and say this is still what's better for the interest as a whole. And that's a hard challenge for a new body.
It is, and I mean, the first thing is to properly define what the public interest is and how to achieve the public interest. Because what you have, and just jumping off from what you just stated, there's no malign intent, but people tend to masquerade their private interest as the public interest. And I try not to use the word private, as there's always this private versus public ownership of issues challenged. So I instead use particular interest of an organization or person, either public or private, against the overall public interest. So the regulator needs to be able to cut through the veil and understand, okay, this is like you stated, this is nicely worded, but in reality, it's really not achieving the public interest as a whole.
And to what extent do you think defining the public interest lies in the hands of the Energy Bureau versus in political leadership? Because this is where, I mean, we see this in regulatory or in supposedly independent bodies all over the
Sorry.
place.
Leadership
I
or
was
interference?
I was
No
just listening
comment,
to
no comment, no comment.
the role of the Federal Reserve in the 1920s, and we have a particularly public fight right now between the President of the United States and the Federal Reserve. It's not necessarily new in the sense that the Federal Reserve's always been conscientious of the quote unquote political or public interest, even if it wasn't as direct, an involvement as President Trump has done. But that sort of speaks to my question, which is how does political leadership that's creating the rules take into consideration what's regulatorily feasible and vice versa for the regulator to say it sounds good and it might be electable, but it's really not in the best interest from an energy sector standpoint. What's the interplay there between politicians and the regulator?
The first thing is that we need to, I would just say, and I've been thinking about this for quite some time. I'm in the process of developing uh, a new framework. The problem is the framework might be broken, or the framework that has been used until now is not working. And what we're doing is we keep using the same framework and we try to make that framework work. And like it's very, and I want to say more because I'm in the middle of developing it. So I'll show you once I do it.
Excellent.
But we need to look at it differently, right? We need to change the way things are being evaluated and decisions are being made needs to change.
I agreed. And I think that a point about the public interest is not only what is not in the public interest. You may have somebody come to you with a great proposal, right? And they have interest in it, but it's definitely in line with the public interest. But the regulator also has to judge when, right? There's limited resources, there's limited ability to execute, and
Yes.
there are more priorities right now. So in order to skip to the head ahead of other things in priority, it must find purchase either by demonstrating greater worth in the shorter term. Unfortunately, it might also mean a public campaign and politics that means that it has to be raised above other things and put to, and that could be bad or good. But it's not just that this is unambiguously in the public interest. I agree, but we don't have the resources to deal with this now, and we've got too many other priorities. We have to do these first.
No, you hit
Yeah.
the nail on the head, because it's not necessarily determine what's the direction of change, but what is the rate of that move
Yep.
towards change.
So
Well, it's
Jose,
the first derivative.
on that point,
Yeah.
let me dive into that both historically and we can put the magic crystal ball in your hands for this year. So historically, when you think about your time at the regulator, what would you have either moved up the priority ladder or down with the benefit of hindsight? What would you what regulatory decision would you revisit, either putting it lower on the priority list or focusing on it now?
That's a good question. The challenge is that we would not have anticipated when I was there the changes that first Hurricane Maria that happened when I was the chairman. Even though you could say that we are right on the hurricane belt, so it was just a matter of time, not if but when. But we were focused on the bankruptcy because that was the main focus at the time. And it still is the focus. We haven't been able to really solve that entirely, part of it, right? So I'm afraid I cannot tell you if we would have done things different in hindsight. Because something that we did was we cannot do everything right now. And I-57 had a lot of uh, eh, commands that we need to finish, and we had to prioritize them. And that was the first thing we did. We said we need to figure out what has priority and put all our resources towards that. For example, one of the things that people were asking was wheeling and the wheeling rate, and that we will go to every single forum and people will be like willing, 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 willing. That's the solution. And we decided that willing was not to be tackled at that time. There were some other priorities. Again, bankruptcy, the state of the of the grid, and that was even before Hurricane Maria hit. So willing had no priorities. And I participated at a forum once. It's a shame that I don't have a copy or a transcript of my participation. It was one of the few that I actually was pretty good at. Typically, I'm not a very good speaker, but it was about willing, and people were pushing willing. And I asked them, "What's your main reason why do you want willing?" "Oh, because we want a lower rate." Well, okay, so we lower the rates. That's it, and or we have a set rate, say 20 cents, 25 cents. Are you happy? Do you still need willing, or is it the rate? Oh well, no. Well, I don't know. Okay, so let's focus on let's get into the what really matters right now at that moment. Instead of trying to, not that it's noise, but it's really like trying to get many interests thinking that they know what the solution is without actually going through the trouble of let's analyze if it's even worth it for Puerto Rico to do something like that at that point in time.
So on
Yep.
that note,
Mhm.
thinking about this year, because it's
Yeah.
still relatively early in 2026,
No comment.
What's that? No
No
comment.
comment.
So many of the issues, the bankruptcy, the stability of the grid, wheeling as an example, many of these things are still untackled, at least in their entirety. So, I'm going to force your prioritization here a little bit, and this is no comment on the regulator itself. It's not a comment on what they are or are not doing. But if you can only fix one of the three issues this year, collections, demand response, transmission upgrades, where do you start?
My focus will be on reliability. Reliability. Because, there's one thing that I think we get confused. And I've been thinking about this, I won't say for a long time, but it has been, from the past few months, I've been thinking about this. And it's really, I don't know if you remember, either of you remember the first rate case, and maybe they even brought it on this rate case as well, when they are making the assumptions of long-term demand, right? Um, and for the commercial and industrial sector, they use the GDP to determine long-term demand, right? Or to try to determine the rate, the demand for commercial industrial sector. And back then we took it and we addressed it, we took the information. But now that I'm looking at it, it's not really that GDP is a driver of the energy consumption or the energy demand, but because you have the available energy, then you can actually be
Yep.
productive, and actually the energy is the one that is the driver of the GDP, right? Yeah, there are some other additional factors, but the main component is the energy availability. So if you want to tackle the Puerto Rico as a whole, not only, okay, the rates per se, is you need to have the energy available. That's the first
Yeah.
thing to do. So it's reliability really, and resiliency. Like if you have obviously a situation like Hurricane Maria, you have to come back up quickly. And
Yep.
from there, then you do the rest.
So how would you go about, because you've just touched on a couple of things that I was thinking when you were talking about it, is reliability. It comes in a couple of colors. I mean, key is obviously addressing key existing fail points, right, in the grid. That's very much an engineering solution. Capital is actually capital available specifically for that. If you can get enough working capital back to the bankruptcy, that's one thing. The lack of reliable generation to meet demand, at least within certain bounds, right? We're not there yet. So that is one that piece. And then the third thing that I would think of that you just talked about is the ability to come back up quickly, right? And part of that is a combination of those two, but it's also the ability to be able to anticipate failures and pre-position teams and have the right trained people, the resources, et cetera, to be able to do that. Again, something that I think people, including Luma, are very capable of doing if they have the resources to do it. So a lot of it does seem to come back to resource. But I think I would tend to agree with you. That would be where I would try and focus is on, reliability, resiliency. Any
Yeah.
comments to that, or is that effectively what you were saying?
Yeah, no, that goes along the lines of what I was saying.
Okay.
And you also obviously need to address or keep in consideration the energy burden, right, of, the rate, right, and how much can actually people pay for it. So there are a couple of, I say the way I can't come up with the word in English now, but let's say there are a few levers that you have to start working on. So it's not only let's increase the rate 11 cents, for example. Just, it's all right, 11 cents to do this and that, whatever the proposal is, for whatever the priority is. So it's kind of like looking at, okay, let's take a look at this. Before we start looking at increasing the rate, let's assume that we are going to leave the rate as is. And we want to maintain this reliability or increase the reliability. What are the options? What can we do? Let's not raise the rate. Let's force these people, and it might just have to start with engineers and economists, really, and leave the lawyers and the financiers for the next wave. And let's figure out, okay, what we need to do. Let's relocate these resources from this capital investment from here to here. It might need to be, okay, instead of investing, let's just say a number, right? Just say $20 million on this line from here to there. Let's buy, let's put non-wire alternatives on this location, right? And let's say, okay, let's put a small battery on each single house, not a full battery. You don't have to give him the full blown, but say, let's put the batteries around instead. Could we do that? I know we don't have the answer right now here, but I'm saying to actually have, and this goes back to just let's look at the way we're taking this, making decisions. Look at the framework of we're making decisions, and say, okay, let's not go immediately with the standard. This is the way, the standard engineering solution, the standard a 20th century solution to problems, energy problems. I'll be like, okay, let's get creative. What can we do? How can we raise the? Are you talking to us or are you talking to the server?
Sorry, I got muted because somebody started playing music over here. So it's actually I was asking without looking if the music was live. So gonna go back on mute because obviously
No, no.
there's
I
sound in the
already.
background.
I thought you were trying to say something, and then I lost my. I was on my
So
monologue. As
No,
I
no, yeah, I
no,
know
no,
you were
no,
doing you were doing great. My fault. I'm gonna go back on
no,
mute
no,
so we
no.
don't get
I
this.
just.
Jose,
Right, this
I'll help
Chris
get you
Isaac
back on
stuff we
track.
got to cut off.
I'll help you get back on track. So I think that I tend to agree. I think that before we start looking at total system overhaul, there are certain things that are low hanging fruit or relatively low hanging fruit that can represent greater reliability at a lower cost, and provide all sorts of operational benefits and end user benefits, right? Because at the end of the day, you're not fixing the grid for any other reason other than it's a more reliable public service, right? For the people that rely on it. So, one of the things that strikes me as low hanging fruit is a fuel shift. We burn a lot of high cost, high price volatility, dirty bunker and diesel fuels on the island. And shifting that to natural gas would not only provide a significant cost saving and cost stability, but an environmental benefit. And why is that not something that the regulator or why don't I hear more vocal advocates for a fuel shift? Is that a capital requirement? Is it what's the issue with switching our thermal units to natural gas?
You're asking me as if I was sitting there? No, I don't have an answer to you for that. I mean, I already told you I'm not gonna comment on.
No, no, but I mean, is that as low a hanging fruit as it seems to me, or are there more barriers that can
No,
you're
I don't
talking about
even
it
think.
for obvious reasons?
I think that I let me see how I say that. I don't think I partially agree with your statement in the way that let's take a look at fuel and the expensive and more emission producing fuel like is bunker C or uh, I don't necessarily agree that changing to natural gas is the way to solve that problem. Because you are, again, I'm just going to use you as an example, not because I believe this is you, but just for the purpose of this conversation. We
Yeah.
all agree on that?
No, no, that's fine, and and
Okay.
and I'm a happy scapegoat, so go
No,
on.
no, no. Like you say, you immediately assume this change to natural gas. Oh, let me rephrase it. I'm not saying you immediately assume, but you just stated that change from bunker C to natural gas. But then what other option could there be instead of natural gas? And let's not put any price. Let's assume the price is not a problem. We'll look at price later. Let's just look at performance and what do we want to do, right? So it's like, okay, so you could do natural gas. That's an option. You could also do All right, pues let's put batteries, substantially sized batteries there with their own associated either solar or wind. All right, that's another option. Or how about, I mean, let's expand and see fuel cells. Yeah.
So here would be my pushback on that, which is if we're looking at the lowest hanging of low hanging fruit, retrofitting existing fuel burning plants to a cleaner, more reliable, lower cost fuel seems to be easier than new development. And maybe there's a whole variety of reasons why that's partly true and partly not. But building out new solar and wind at existing points of interconnection where we already have infrastructure, it seems much more cost intensive and capital intensive for limited resources that don't exist. And so at some point you have to start thinking about where the money comes from, and that goes back into the collections conversation or working capital access, and the utility's still bankrupt. So what can be done prior to that broad system overhaul? And I hear your stipulation that if cost isn't an issue, but the reality is cost is a huge
Because
issue for
no,
for
well, it depends. I have to push back again. Is the framework you're looking at it, because you're still looking at taking externalities out of the equation. So when you talk about cost, you're not including externalities to it. And so you're only assuming the cost of production of energy and not contemplating the cost of the byproducts of the production of that energy. And that's typically done by most economists. So it's not, and that's the first flaw on the framework, is assuming that these externalities is something that, again, that you're isolated from when you're.
What's the top externality in this circumstance that you think we should be considering?
Well, the first thing would be the emissions. You have lower emissions with natural gas, but you still have emissions. You're not emissions free.
But that's a positive externality if you're lowering emissions.
But is that better than zero emissions?
I guess by definition, any number is more than zero. But
No,
It-
but
it's
that's
not
what I'm.
it's not better than zero, but when your probability of getting to zero emissions is in the low single digits, given all the other realities, and your possibility of lowering it is probably in, north of 80%, even with the bankruptcy, then it becomes a much more likely path to take. These analyses still have to be presented and decisions still have to be made. But yeah, I mean, again,
I
I'm a
think
pragmatist in this way. So
no, I think there has to be. I
yeah.
mean, it could still be the solution. You could still be after you take externalities into account.
well,
But
and here's sort of my analysis is,
yeah,
and I think you hit on this perfectly a moment ago, which is if reliability of the system is the key priority. It's not that emissions
no, no,
or other
is
positive or
one of the.
negative.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's one of the key priorities. Please, but continue. Yeah.
One of the key priorities. I mean, at some point, you could turn off all of the systems and have zero emissions, but that's not optimal either, right? So
Well,
it's a balancing effect of all of these things. And I'm not saying that everything switched over to natural gas is the end all be all, but in terms of a low hanging, immediate, or at least low timeline, fast timeline, accelerated timeline, whatever you want to call it, type of change to improve collections, to improve other areas of system reliability. I think it has to be more vocally considered than it currently is. And I'll have to say, just sort of parenthetically and as a tangential, I think these externalities need to be considered for everything. So
yeah.
Tom and I have been vocal advocates for thinking about end of life management of solar panels and e-waste, and have a partnership we're very proud of with e-cycling to be looking at some of this stuff, because we think you're not allowed to build a nuclear plant without having a plan for the nuclear waste. For a coal plant, you are forced to think about coal ash. For thermoelectric plants, you're forced to think about emissions. And I don't see Puerto Rico having a cogent plan for what do we do with the solar panels or the battery waste that will ultimately be created. Now, again, it's not to say that those externalities kill the project. It's that let's be let's have the long-term thought, as you're doing with natural gas, on all of the projects that we want to build. So I'm in favor of thinking about externalities, but I'm also trying to prioritize
Well,
on what is
the
the
first
quickest development we can do.
well, the first thing is that we need to stop referring to them as externalities. And that's, that's the first. It's really part of the project.
Yeah, no, they're endogenous, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's really, but then going back to just the natural gas, but then why doing the retrofit to natural gas and not use synthetic diesel or e-diesel, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to retrofit. Yeah, well, then you are recycling the carbon from the atmosphere. So you still have emissions, but they much lower than natural gas. So it is I mean, again, this is a matter of changing the framework. What exactly, how are we looking at it?
Yeah. So, Tom, do you want to jump in? I know you're on and off mute
Sorry.
for background
I
noise,
mean,
but I want to give you.
I just,
sorry.
yeah.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second. It's just that
Hold on.
my son was supposed to have a swimming practice today, but they canceled. So I have to, uh, pardon me one second, that the teacher,
Well,
but
I actually wanted to interject that I just got a warning that I'm down to like 10% battery, and I brought my external battery, but I forgot my charging cords. So
that's what happens when you're enjoying
typical.
yourself at a nice cafe. Well, cafe. Yeah.
So
That's an
and
externality, Tom.
no,
That's
and this is great. I mean, let's see how far this goes. I do need to keep a little bit of battery power, so I might have to sign off here because there's some people I need to coordinate with later.
I'm
But
hurt now, Tom. You haven't spoken to me in a few years, and now you're
well,
just blowing me off
let's
with some
get
other
you back. I mean,
people.
I've been talking to Allison and people about coming because we want to talk about power harvest industries too. Right? And
You're gonna
I
have to
hope
do
we'd
a
have
second
some
one.
time on this. Let's do another one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're looking at microgrids, and we're getting ready to talk about stuff. So yeah.
Well, so Tom, in the name of saving as much battery, I want to move to a different area of our conversation, which is related to what we were just talking about. But Jose, how do we fix the incentive structures either within PREPA or PREB or LUMA? Whose incentives are misaligned with the public interest that need to be addressed?
I'm not gonna answer that question, Tom. That's yeah. How about throwing that bomb right at the end?
Hey, it's only a bomb if you step on it. Yeah. So
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just sidestepping.
So you
I mean,
blink twice if
if I'm being held hostage,
You're not jumping on that hand grenade, right?
it's a challenge, really, because we all, even I have my own beliefs, and I think I have, what I think it's better for the public interest. But I think everybody believes that of their own interest, that they're aligned with the public interest.
So okay, but then that sounds like to me a breakdown in leadership, right?
I'm not
Because
saying anything.
if everyone,
No,
well,
I don't know how. I don't know
but
how
so if
you.
everybody
How
thinks they're speaking for everybody, then it sort of requires either a chief executive or an executive director or somebody at the top to say, here's what the vision is, and if PREPA doesn't mind if LUMA fails, and the Energy Czar doesn't mind if LUMA fails, and in fact they're going to sort of push it off the edge if they think it's close to it, then and ultimately me as a ratepayer needs a utility that can cover its costs, and I need all the leadership to be in alignment. I pay the cost of that misalignment. So that to me is of grave concern. I don't hear enough people talking about cutting through the various, as you called them, particular interest groups. Yeah, so Tom just put Governor Jose Humberto in chat. That's a write-in candidate in case anybody's interested. But I think
Yeah,
I
you
think net
started with
metering
my
is.
platform already.
I think net metering is a prime example here. Right? If net metering remains unchanged, who ultimately pays for grid maintenance?
I mean, you said something that is key. I mean,
Was it
misalignment.
the Governor Jose Humberto part?
Yeah, precisely that. The misalignment with the public interest, inefficiencies. Everything is borne by the ratepayer at the end of the day. the ratepayer is the one that carries the cost. And we just say ratepayers because we're just focusing on energy regulators or energy regulation, and we're not talking about the whole island, which we get into a whole different or additional deeper conversation, right?
Why hasn't Puerto Rico fully deployed smart metering infrastructure? What do you think the key obstacle to that initiative is?
Well, go and ask Luma and the regulator what's going on there.
Do you think the program rollout issue on their side?
No, there's always a challenge, obviously. Again, it's the matter of resources, where to apply the resources, and giving priorities. I mean, if you're always trying to put out fires, then you cannot focus on the long-term goals if you're just putting out fires all the time, right?
Is time of use pricing politically feasible before grid reliability improves?
I think that nothing is feasible until we change the framework of how we're evaluating, how we are making the decisions. Because we can throw, I would say, I'm going to just refer to it as band aids, but it's not really band aids. But it's really like you can say tools, or let's use a hammer now, or let's use a drill without knowing, okay, well, what exactly are we building? What do we need? How do we know what are the appropriate tools if we don't know what we are building or what we need to build? And so to answer your question, I don't know if time of use will
Yeah.
be good.
That's really funny when you talk about tools and what we're going to build, et cetera. We've had Sam and I several conversations with a couple of different people in Luma in particular, and that's a point that they keep making.
Oh, what
So
really?
yeah, it's like, what are we going to build? It's like we can bring the resources, we can bring the people, but we got to have the capital. We got to understand what it is that we're going to be building, right? And that we can maintain those resources and we could focus on that stuff, and things just keep going one way or another. So you're
Haven't
other
even
people are thinking the same thing. Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
haven't even discussed or start discussing about sustainable index, sustainable welfare for the island,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and covers from everything from energy to food, sustainability, obviously,
Mhm.
appropriate income. One thing is related to, again, this is all interrelated issues that can't, I'm sorry, can't, no, should not be addressed as isolated one from the other. So we need to find a way to make sure that we start holistically looking at the whole picture. And even though they say maybe for example, okay, the PREP has the statute to do energy, and then the Department of Environment and Natural Resources have a different responsibility. So then people are just, okay, so that's them. We don't do that, that's them. And so it's different processes, one affecting the other. Again, so I don't know. To going back, we keep repeating the same thing through this conversation, but it's really the más importante, no? The what's important to the whole issue.
Do you think that there's let me preface this question with I'm in favor of a decentralization of plenty of things that I think are caught in bottlenecks in the centralized government, whether it's education or basic infrastructure or a variety of other things that are managed centrally and there's not really another organic home because municipalities aren't the right scale for it. But there have been proposals for regional electric companies. Previous to PREPA, there were regional electric companies. Is that a model you see ever coming back into the fold where you have some degree of competition and something that's beyond the one size fits all model for the island's electrical needs? Or is that fanciful and doesn't make sense?
It might make sense, but I don't think that it has been properly looked at. To be honest, I don't think it has, because in order for it to make sense, you need to be able to have. You need to have a let me see an efficient market structure, not a real competitive market structure, but you have to sort of simulate as close as possible because you don't have enough. If you believe or you say, okay, the law of supply and demand is what governs everything, right? Which we that perfect scenario doesn't exist. So you say, okay, I need to have enough supply and I need to have enough demand so that there's not anybody with enough market power that will then capture the whole market, right? So it is, I don't think it is something that is far fetched. I don't think it's being looked at properly. I think that it has been dismissed because it hasn't, they maybe don't have a way, or nobody has actually thought of a way to properly buy, Tom. The-
We'll assume he's there until he's not.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't left yet, but I'm getting down into single digits, so I'm turning off the camera, and I
Yeah.
think I'm sure I can beg, borrow, or steal a charge at the next place I go. So thanks.
Yeah. So again, I do not know to answer your question. I think it could be looked at properly, but then it has to be looked at properly with people that are interested in seeing if it will work, not people interested in I have to make it work because I have a financial incentive or I have a
Does the virtual power plant model scale in Puerto Rico? Is that something that could be an interim solution to a regional power provider in that you onboard tens of thousands of users and that ultimately looks like an alternative utility? Or have we sort of hit the ceiling as far as where VPPs can go in Puerto Rico?
we haven't reached the ceiling, but I do think that the compensation schedule needs to be looked at. Because right now, I think the compensation schedule is too high for the virtual power plant. It's really the energy or the participants of virtual power plant are already receiving a full retail compensation for their energy, for their system. And then on top of that, they get $1 for kilowatt hour on the VPP participation. So you could say that the energy that they're providing for on the VPP system is being repaid or credited at $1.25. The dollar from the VPP and the 25 cents of their own the solar production, right? So in order for it to work, that needs to change as well. So it's not
Is that
really technical challenge per se, though there might be some technical challenges. It's technical what? I don't know what turned down. I don't know what else Tom said. Tom, you're supposed to be saving your battery. If you keep writing, you're gonna keep losing
Yeah,
your battery as well.
I know. Yeah, no, it's just I agree with you. I think the compensation is too high. They had to pick something. They picked a nice round number without looking at what's going to generate participation in the system. And I think you can start there, but you need to start turning down. You need to change the framework, right? To
Yeah.
use your word, you need to turn down the headline rates, but include a capacity, right? If you're going to dedicate capacity in certain circumstances for this, you get a minimum amount of money, and if you are called on and you can't provide, well, you get big penalties. But so there's a give or take in the way they price that, and so you turn down the amount that you're paying, and then you'll be paying less.
Yeah, and no double dipping.
Yeah, absolutely,
so?
absolutely.
Does this
But
do,
yeah,
go ahead,
you
Tom? Sorry.
manage. I'm just saying, yeah, there's a technological threshold that may not be ready to adapt in order to do that, bill it, do it in real time, etc. So that needs to be looked at as well. But you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Well, and
Thanks.
this is the perfect segue because I think it looks fundamentally different at the industrial user level, right? So if you had and maybe that's not VPP as much as it is just a demand response program for industrials on the island that would incentivize grid stabilization, um, incentivizing your number one sector of the economy and not entirely losing out on the customer basis of them defecting from the grid or defecting 80 to 90% from the grid. So Jose, I know we're coming up on time here. I wanted to ask you a couple of lightning round questions where you can
Jesus.
you can
Yeah.
say yes,
You
no
didn't
comment.
listen. You didn't warn me for this type. You said it was gonna be a friendly conversation, not the bombs that you're throwing.
I know. Well, I was, you know, first I'm going to ask you to comment on the governor, and then I'm going to tell you What municipalities would you get rid of first? No, I'm joking.
What do you live exactly?
Yeah, we live in the same municipality, so not that one. Can PREPA be reformed without emerging from bankruptcy, or is that a prerequisite that's looming over our head, and we are just stuck without until we're out of bankruptcy, we're in the mud.
I don't know. No comment. Jeez, I don't know.
All right,
The fifth.
what's that?
I plead the fifth. No,
Let me.
I mean that's a hard question to answer. I mean, you have to actually. It's easier to be Monday morning quarterback, right? I mean, it's easier to sit here and then say they are doing this wrong or this should be done this way, right? Without actually participating and actually trying to put an effort to say and look, okay, this is the right way to do it. So
So so we're not going to hold you to any of this. We're not going
please don't do
to.
it because
Yeah, and Tom's response to that is mud and hopefully innovation. And
yeah.
this is where, I'm specifically focused on the smart meter initiative, because if we can start having better data about who's using what, and start being able to implement a time of use rate that, in every other economic model, supply and demand have to equal each other at the price. And we have an issue where demand's fluctuating and supply's fluctuating and our price does not. And that means the system is just less sophisticated than it could be. And that's not to say that time of use rates are ultimately the most sophisticated thing you could do, but it's a step in the right direction for the utility under whatever name to ultimately collect what it's due. So go ahead on that.
Next time we talk, I'll have a pushback about time of use rate, but not now.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple of these questions, and just in a line or two, you can answer if you'd like. What belief about renewable integration do you think is most overstated?
One belief about renewable integration. Well,
Or a challenge associated with renewable integration that's most understated?
no. I think that the problem is from the get go. I just so you know where I'm coming from. From what I have seen and what I have been looking at for the past few years, I do believe that 100% renewable is actually the way to go. Like no, there's no other option. But that being said, thinking that only solar is the solution, or just looking at renewable energy integration as only mainly solar. And I think that is detrimental to the renewable energy cause as well, because there are some challenges that solar have. So that needs to be recognized that could be complemented with other type of renewable energy sources. But if we cover our eyes to the limitations, then we really are not going to move forward. I don't even know what Tom said. Tom is keep wants to be. He might as well turn on his video again because
It's just I'm not well. Look,
yeah.
it doesn't take as much power to sort of text or have the video off. So what I again, it's like 30 seconds later, but bankruptcy is not it doesn't make everything getting out of bankruptcy doesn't make everything instantly better, but it does make everything easier and
Mm.
makes many things possible, right? That are just not possible right now, right? So that was the main point. The others about renewable, it's like I've spent the last 20 years promoting renewable energy, et cetera, and I want a renewable energy future, but there's timing and there's degrees, and I agree in the renewable and zero emissions and non-fossil fuels is ultimately, going to be the best, potential future for Puerto Rico. But, you have to look at the situation on the ground, and we need to think about Puerto Rico as if it was Rwanda, because with the bankruptcy and everything else, in fact, it doesn't have the credit capacity of Rwanda. So if you want to think about it in terms of what we need to do and baby steps, we need to think about getting to that goal, but we need to think about it in the terms of overcoming the obstacles and the lack of credit, the lack of experience, the lack of institutional capacity, et cetera, and begin to plan and invest accordingly. So that's my only thing.
But thinking back to, I guess the last 5 or 6 years, what's the best energy decision Puerto Rico's made
Bring me from New York to be a commissioner.
in the last 5 years?
Yeah, that was. Let me see. No, I already uh,
That was 10 years
hiring
ago.
me, hiring me to do work. That's the best
What,
decision.
what about the worst decision?
Not hiring me.
Do you think the island's fundamentally underestimating the value of storage capacity?
It could be. It could be. I mean, it's just everything. Again, everything has its pros and cons, or its challenge. Not really cons, but its challenges.
When you look at the development of the Tesla BESS project with Genera versus the Energisa project, which do you think is more indicative of future developments?
No comment.
All right. What are we missing? What are your thoughts on the solar rebound effect?
Well, the solar rebound is a reality that people don't talk about it, particularly our friends that, our colleagues. When I have a client that wants to put solar, I go through the problem, through the painstaking time to explain the solar rebound and how would it happen. And obviously, you have to tell people that this is not your case because I know this is not you, but typically, this is what generally happens, right? And people will still, it will still happen.
What is the general response to from a residential or commercial customer when they see that? And I mean, is it that's not going to happen to me, or
Yeah,
what's
it's
the
typically people, nobody thinks that that will happen to them, except until you see your first bill and you notice that you're not paying as much, then you say, leave the AC on. Eh, no problem. I'm not paying it. I mean, I'm not paying energy. And that could be, again, this is just speculations, but that's some of the reasons. One, when the systems are not properly designed to take into account for the solar rebound, or that is not properly explained to the customer. The reasons that there are many complaints against companies that they're also paying Luma when they're paying the whatever company that provided. They told me that I was gonna pay $4 and I'm still paying $100 or $200. They lied to me. Uh, and to be honest, they might not even know about it because if you have uh, salespeople just trying to sell to make a sale. They don't even understand the system. They don't understand how to properly install the system. They forget about understanding what the solar rebound is and how it would affect the client. That's not even on their vocabulary.
and who does that have a bigger effect on, the client or the grid?
Yes. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I think
Who and I guess maybe a proxy for that question is who needs to worry about the solar rebound most? Is it the people who are selling and installing these systems, or the regulator and the utility saying, be mindful that if you go your own route, these are externalities, to use the word of the program?
we said we were not gonna use that word anymore. I'm not sure. Why do you want to keep pushing my buttons? I didn't know that was gonna be the part of this conversation. Eh,
It's part of doing business with me, Jose.
I understand. No, I think everybody needs to be worried, and I guess the solar rebound, you will be concerned not only when does it happen when you're the utility? When exactly does it happen? Is it happen this extra consumption right when it's my peak? When the peak demand happens, are you going to increase my peak demand? Or is it happen during the daylight while you are also supplying energy? Again, this needs a further analysis. But
Let me so we touched on some politically sensitive or sensitive otherwise, not even necessarily politically sensitive issues. But let me ask one that has no sensitivities. What is the post federal fund future for Puerto Rico look like? How do we, regardless of energy, create a self sustaining economic model for the island?
well, I'm in the process of creating that model. I'm not gonna we're gonna dedicate a full podcast just to discuss that model. I'm not going to just give you a tease right now.
Oh, give us something.
No, 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 no. That's we need to give it a what they say, cliffhanger.
All right. Well, then on that note, let me read Tom's note that he put in chat. He said, "Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk more about the solar rebound and more about power harvest industries when we have you back." I'm particularly interested in that new framework and your thoughts on it. I am concerned, and I think you identified it perfectly, the relationship between energy development and GDP growth. Economic prosperity and energy are intimately linked, and I'm concerned that not enough people are thinking about the post federal fund future, let alone how to use the federal funds that exist. So I'm grateful to hear that you have that front of mind, and when you have that more fleshed out and are ready to share it publicly, would love to have you back on to understand the highlights and poke your buttons
And
and
well, of
yeah.
course, that's part of doing business with you. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Jose Humberto, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your insight and your service to the energy sector on the island, and we look forward to having you back.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.